Hi everyone, in this video I'm going to look at what your options are if you don't quite get the ATAR that you would like in order for you to study the degree that you intended to do. I'm going to look at what you can do in that situation in order to get the career that you ultimately want to achieve. Now I'm an associate professor of finance, so I've obviously come across quite a few students and have had to deal with quite a few options in this respect. And I also found myself in that situation when I initially entered undergraduate education. I didn't get the ATAR, or in my case the UAI, that I needed in order for me to study combined law. So I had to transfer in. And I'm going to talk about some of the options that you can take in order for you to study the degree you wanted to study, ultimately, or in order for you to get the career that you would like to achieve. Alright, so with that in mind, let's go through some of these options. Alright, so the first option you have is that you transfer degrees. So here what you do is you start off in one degree, then transfer into another one. And this is a relatively straightforward process, but there are things you need to bear in mind. Firstly, transfers are not automatic and they are competitive. The more difficult the degree is to get into, the more competitive it's going to be. Secondly, when they're assessing these transfers, they'll consider the two overarching things. One, your initial ATAR, and two, your grades in that first year of study. So you need to make sure you get good grades in order for you to transfer. The third thing you need to bear in mind is that when you transfer, you'll need to meet the prerequisites and requirements for that new degree in order for you to graduate. This means that you might lose some subjects that you'd initially studied, because those subjects might not count or be relevant to your new degree. So when you're doing this transfer, you want to make sure you start off in a degree that you'll A, do well in, and B, is going to give you as many credits when you transfer as possible. So by do well in, I mean make sure that it's easy enough, and also you're interested in it, and also you're good at it. So, for example, if you miss out on commerce and you're not particularly numerative, then don't enroll in engineering because you're not going to do well in it. So do something that is going to be relevant and interesting to you and you'll get good grades in so you can do your transfer. That's effectively the point here. Second thing is obviously make sure that when you do this transfer, you can get credits transferred across. So in my case, I wanted to do combined law, so I wanted to study commerce, majoring in finance, and also study law. I didn't get into law, so I had to transfer in. What I did then is I enrolled in straight commerce, majoring in actuarial studies and majoring in finance. I could then transfer into law and have most of my subjects count as credits. Not all of them, but most of them, because actuarial studies had some math subjects that wouldn't have counted toward that combined law degree. In any case, it mostly counted. When I selected that initial commerce degree, you are obviously not guaranteed a transfer. So I selected a commerce degree that would have been useful in any case. So an actuarial studies degree is useful if you want to go into quantitative finance, which could have been an option for me if I didn't get into law. So that's the first major approach. Try to transfer into the degree you wanted after the first year. Again, it's risky, but there are ways to make it work by doing a degree that you'll be good in and then ensuring that you get enough credits for you to be able to transfer. The second approach is you rely on postgraduate education. So here what you could do is you enroll in your initial degree that you kind of use as your follow-up or runner-up prize here. You enroll in that initial degree, and then you work on the premise that you'll use postgraduate degrees in order for you to get to the career or the outcome that you want. So in the law scenario, you'd be enrolling in your initial degree, so commerce, arts, whatever. Then you do a JD after your initial degree. Notably, however, this approach can be expensive. Some of these postgraduate degrees are going to be full fee paying, so they're going to cost you quite a bit of money. Bear that in mind when you take on this strategy. It can be a useful way for you to pivot into the career you want, but it might not be the cheapest way for you to do so. Another situation is, say you miss out on commerce, but you get into science or engineering. What you do then is study science or engineering, then do your commerce degree or masters of commerce afterwards, or masters of finance or masters of whatever. So obviously the degrees you enroll in are going to depend on what career you want, but that's one possible strategy here. Undergraduate in something that's kind of related to what you want, followed by postgraduate to ensure you get into the career that you ultimately want. Again, a couple of downsides to this. A, expensive. B, some of these postgraduate degrees aren't all very good. You need to make sure you go to a university with a good postgraduate degree. In this case, when employers are assessing you, they will look at both your undergraduate, but also primarily your postgraduate. So in this case, say you didn't get into commerce at the place you want to go to, so UNSW or USyd, and you enroll at, say, UWS. Then you can do a master's at USyd or UNSW, and then effectively upgrade that to something that employers are going to consider more highly, particularly if you're looking at things like investment banks. And in that case, you're able to show to the investment banks that maybe you didn't get into the degree you wanted to begin with, but you're able to do well in your undergraduate, then do well in a master's, and then you're worthwhile hiring. So that's the underlying approach there when you're taking the postgraduate approach. Again, can be expensive, but it often is not super high risk. The reason it's not super high risk is a number of these master's degrees are not necessarily competitive to get into because they're quite expensive. So the number of people wanting to do them is not super high. The third approach is you do a degree in something closely related to what you want, but you do honors in it. And by doing honors in that degree, you can signal your quality to potential employers. And employers might look at that honors degree and evaluate you more positively than they otherwise would. This will only work in some fields. So for example, say you really wanted to work as an engineer, but you then do an arts degree. Your arts with honors is not going to make you an engineer. However, say you wanted to work in commerce, but you only get into engineering, then you engineering with honors, and then employers are going to look favorably upon you if you do well in it, because there are portable skills. So this approach only really works if there are portable skills to the ultimate career that you want. Whether or not that's the case depends on what career you want to be in. Again, if it's commerce, that engineering or maths type approach could ultimately work for you due to the portable skills between the two. Again, depends a lot on what you want to do. It can be a bit risky because there's no guarantee that employers are going to consider that alternative the same as they would have the baseline degree that you would see as initially most directly relevant. The next strategy is what you do is you enroll in something that isn't your first preference, but you do additional outside qualifications that make you more attractive to employers in that field. So again, to give you an example here, say you didn't get into commerce, but you wanted to work in that field, so you get into science. Then you study maths if you're good at maths, but while you're doing this, you also do a CFA. And by doing CFA, Chartered Financial Analyst, you're able to show to employers you're interested in and competent at finance. And by the way, you've picked up some really strong quant skills. That makes you more attractive. And then employers will go, well, this person didn't do a commerce degree, but they had the wherewithal, drive, and intelligence to do this professional qualification that is meaningful to us. And then this can help you get hired. Again, not guaranteed at all. Again, it can be risky, but it is going to help you. And doing high quality outside qualifications is what's important here. So say it's finance, do a high quality outside qualification, or at least the exams for it, for something that is well recognized. So for example, CFA or KIA. Don't do something like, I don't know, a general certificate in financial planning, because employers in major investment banks aren't going to care that much. So it's going to have to be something that is well recognized for this strategy to really work. Again, it can be risky, but it can sort of work out. The next strategy you can take is you do the same type of degree you were interested in, but do it at a lesser university. So one with a lower ATAR cutoff. So say, for example, you want to do commerce at UNSW or USyd, but you don't get in, so you decide to do it at UTS, or you decide to do it at UWS or Macquarie or whatever. Similarly, for law, you don't get into law at USyd or UNSW, so you do it at UTS or Macquarie or whatever. This can be a risky strategy, and whether it works depends on a couple of things. It will depend a lot on the field, i.e., are you going to be working independently as a sole proprietor afterwards, or are you targeting getting into a major organization? And it will depend a lot on what grades you get at that other institution. So if you're going to go for a lesser institution, you'll need to be top of the year for that to work out. I.e., an employer from a major investment bank typically is going to hire from the GO8 universities. So in that case, you really want to try to target being in the GO8 universities and more going down the transfer track than going down the other university track. The other thing to bear in mind is that say you don't get a job from the other university, you might need to do a master's at these GO8 universities in order for you to be attractive to employers. So you might not get the career, at least not immediately, that you'd want from that. That said, there are alternatives, so you can pivot your career. So say, for example, we go down the law situation here. You start off with law, you do law at a university that isn't GO8, and you don't get into one of the major law firms. What you can do then is it's not the end of the world. What you do is you work at a slightly lower tier law firm, then you become a barrister. And in that case, you can effectively make up for that situation that had arisen. Or you do that law degree at that lesser university, then an LLM at a higher tier university, either in Australia or overseas. In any case, there are ways to make it work for you, but it will take some creative thinking for it to ultimately pan out in a way that is going to be beneficial to you career-wise. So those are some strategies you might take on if you don't get the ATAR that you initially wanted. Not getting the ATAR you wanted is not the end of the world. There are strategies for you to get the career that you ultimately want, and which strategy you take is going to depend on your risk tolerance, which one you think is going to be the most direct way for you to get the degree. So which strategy you take will depend a little bit on your risk tolerance, and which method you think is going to be the best way for you to get a degree that is going to be attractive to employers. There's no one-size-fits-all solution, and it will depend on your personal situation and your personal parameters. I've described what I did, which is I transferred between degrees, and I transferred from commerce into combined law, which ultimately enabled me to achieve what I wanted to achieve. However, what approach you take is going to depend on your personal situation and what you think is going to be the best way to go about doing it for you. And you need to bear in mind the pluses and minuses of each strategy when you're doing it. But in any case, always bear in mind that the ATAR is not the be-all and end-all of your career. There are always ways to make up for it if you didn't quite get the ATAR that you want, and it certainly is not going to determine your career in the long term. And employers, after you've studied university, are very unlikely to care about your ATAR at all, and what you do at university is going to make the most difference. The final note as well, as I'll mention, when you're at university, in order to make up for some of these detriments, say you don't get the degree that you ultimately want, it's always worth joining societies as leadership members of those societies, or taking on part-time jobs and pursuing leadership roles, so that on your CV, you can actively demonstrate to employers you've built up the skills that they want. You'll want to be able to demonstrate you've built up teamwork and leadership and interpersonal skills and reading and writing communication type skills and problem solving skills. And doing some of those extracurricular activities is a very good way for you to achieve this. i.e., it's a good way for you to show that you can work in a team outside of the pure academic context, that you can lead a team outside of the pure academic context, and you can communicate ideas, and you can solve problems that come up as and when they arise. In any case, those are my thoughts on the strategy that you might have if you don't quite get the ATAR you want, and why there are several options that are still open to you. In any case, I hope this video has been useful to you. I hope it's given you some insight into what options you might have, and I very much hope to see you for future videos. Bye.